Right. Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to the Virgin Author Show. We are three friends bonded by our love of writing, struggling to navigate the publishing world. And I am Mandy McGuire.
And I'm Jana Vandelar.
Hi, I'm Lissa Reese, and I would like to introduce today's guest, Michelle Wildgen. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you.
Michelle is the author of 4 novels, including the soon-to-be-released Wine People. Give us a little visual there, Michelle.
Yay!
There it is. That's coming out next month from Zibby Books. She is also the editor of a food writing anthology called Food and Booze, a former executive editor with the award-winning literary journal Tin House. She is a freelance editor and creative writing teacher in Madison, Wisconsin. We're here to chat about the new novel, Wine People. Congratulations, Michelle, on the new book, and welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. It's so good to be here. I appreciate the wine.
Thank you for your girl. We suffer for the show, but
That's right. Well, we're going to just jump right into it. As everyone knows, we have these special shows with our Zibby Books authors. And so we're going to have a couple questions that are about your book. And then we have some fun stuff towards the end so that readers and listeners can get to know you a little bit better. So your novel is about 2 ambitious women, Wren and Thessaly, if I'm saying her name right, in a male-dominated industry. So can you tell us about your book?
Yes. So, these are 2 women who are really opposites. Wren sort of clawed her way into the wine importing industry from a fairly difficult Midwest background. And Thessaly was sort of born into it because her family are grape growers for really, prestigious producers that the importer actually works with. And so when you meet them, they are very cautious, kind of rivals of each other. And a succession drama is kind of brewing at work on page 1, where the guy who has started the entire thing suddenly starts talking about coming to an end and who is he going to pass the company on to. And so that suddenly makes these 2 look at each other in a new light. And so as they head off to a buying trip in Europe, they start thinking about, is this going to be different? Maybe we should actually be allies. So the book then sort of follows what's going to happen to them. Can they be allies? Can they be even perhaps business partners and friends, or can they not?
yeah.
Well, so I imagine this novel involved a lot of research. I was surprised as the book started how really in depth you went into this whole industry, and I'm curious how that happened. Did you go to wineries? Did you visit any of these places you talk about? And really what we want to know is, how much wine did you drink?
How fun is that? What your research?
The key is never ever to add up how much wine you drank. You can just tell yourself, really, it wasn't that much. Surely it was very little when all was said and done. No, it was a lot of research. And before I even started to write, I was doing the research for maybe, almost a year. And of course, that wasn't like, 40 hours a week of research or anything like that. But it was a pretty steady process because I had worked in restaurants with people who were in wine importing, but it's really hard. And like, until you try to sit down and write about people walking into a room and knowing what they would do, you suddenly realize, like, I don't know anything. And so you just have to go bug people for a long time.
Yeah.
So I went to wineries. I went to a couple of places in Oregon. I visited the central coast of California and Paso Robles with a good friend of mine and another friend who had worked in importing. And we just spent 3 days sort of doing a mini version of being these wine people. While I was in Italy with other friends, we visited a couple of other wineries. And so took a lot of photos and just sort of got a sense of, like, what does it look like there? What do these places feel like? And that was really wonderful too.
Well, I mean, that's kind of how I was wondering, because you talk about, it was kind of contradictory because I kind of stalked you, don't worry. But, I mean, I saw that you kind of wrote some of this, or most of it during COVID, right? And so
I wrote a lot of it then, yeah.
Stuck in there. So, but the book is so cool, you guys. The book goes, through Europe and just having them do all their stuff there. And so you had glorious things like France and Germany and Italy. And then, of course, we went to the Midwest and California wine country. So how did you even go to these places? I mean, well, you went to Paso Robles, is how I pronounced it, and then Portland. But did you end up getting to go to Europe and stuff, or?
Yeah, I actually have never been to Germany, but I was in Italy, and I happened to write about La Marche because that's where the region I was in. But I think I had done all of this research before, and then I started really writing in like 2018, 2019. And at that point, then, even though you're having so much fun talking to people and you'd really rather just keep doing that, you kind of have to make yourself start writing.
Yeah.
So luckily I had already started by the time the pandemic hit. I was, mid draft or something like that. So I spent a lot of the pandemic with like white noise in my ears and just trying to ignore my family.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Because,
that's
Oh,
a really years long process. And I've always been interested in the author's journey and how one idea leads to another and one draft changes to another. And did this morph from an original idea into something completely different? How did it change over time?
Well, at first I didn't know what it was going to be. I knew the world that I wanted it to be in, but I had no idea what the story would be because I didn't know the world well enough to know like what were the sort of opposing forces and what are the things people are dealing with and what kinds of people might realistically be populating it. So a lot of that first research was literally just asking people questions saying, hey, if you work in the wine industry and I don't care how peripherally or what area you work in, I want to talk to you. And so I just talked to everybody I could. And then you start paying attention to the things that capture your attention. And so I knew that I had Ren early on, but I didn't want to write only about one person. I felt like I needed some other character in there for her to be in a relationship with of some sort or another. And I talked to a woman who is the daughter actually of a grape grower in Sonoma. And she convinced her dad to start producing wine. And so they're very prestigious producers now. And that was where the idea of Thessaly kind of came out of. And so I have no idea if she has anything else in common with this other woman, but she's the one who gave me the idea.
Interesting.
Well, and you populate the book with a lot of really interesting characters.
Yeah,
your secondary characters.
Yeah, they're fun.
I love to have weird secondary characters. I love to have slightly irritating characters. Like there's a style of slightly annoying character that I just love to write. And you have to be careful not to write too many of them because people get sick of them. But I don't know why. There's something about the slight rule breaking and their willingness to just irritate other people that I find really enjoyable to write. I'm sure that's revealing of some psychosis of mine. I don't know what it means.
But they're honest characters too, right? Like they're fun and different and like real people.
Hopefully, yeah, that's the goal.
Well, I love that the relationship you chose wasn't a romance, that you chose to have these two women and this friendship, which goes through a lot during the course of the book.
Yeah, I mean, I think like a friendship is, I don't know, I don't want to say that it's unsung, but like we don't necessarily write about them enough. And I don't know about you guys, but my friendships go back really far. They are pretty elastic. They go, there are long periods when maybe you don't talk, or there are periods when you're actually really pretty vexed by each other, but they're really central, I think, to a lot of people's lives. And I'm really interested not only in friendships, but in our workplace selves, because I think growing up, you have this notion that people go into the business world and they just behave rationally. And of course they don't. People are absolutely insane, both in the business world and outside of it. And I love that idea of who are we in these forced relationships, we're like, we're not in those people with those people because we chose them. We just wind up next to them and we have to work out all our stuff with them. Yeah. So between those two things, I was just really interested to uncover what goes on between these people.
Which that actually brings me to, I'm going to bump ahead because I think Mandy was going to talk, but Ren and Thessaly's friendship was pretty brutal. I mean, it was at first I'm like, oh, they're enemies. So throughout the book, I was like, they're going to be like, who's going to win? But then it's like they bond and you'll see in the book who you guys have to all read it. But so it's pretty much like a frenemies type of thing, I think. I guess it's kind of what you're saying here, that you were just really inspired by all the way everybody kind of works within an office place and just with your own. I love what you said about elastic friendships. I mean, everything does kind of change through that. So I mean,
yeah, and they are really, they're not even really frenemies in the beginning. They're very suspicious of each other and not particularly certain that they're even going to like one another. And I was interested in with them is that over the course of their developing friendship and their closeness is they need to become like, each has to become the person she wants to be. Like that is their primary goal.
Which I thought was good because they kind of helped each other do that in a way.
Right.
I love that.
And can they do that? Is it going to be compatible? Because they can stay friends, but they won't necessarily be able to keep the same relationship all the way through as they are each figuring out what they want their individual lives to look like.
Yeah.
No, and the theme of trust that you weave through that whole thing, trusting each other but also trusting themselves and really questioning their own motives.
Yeah. And questioning their own abilities. I think that's something like everybody can relate to, is that awful feeling of like, what if I'm not up to this task? What if I always thought I was, but I've just never challenged myself, or I'm not as good as I thought I would be, or I'm just not as good as that person. I just think that's, these characters are in their 30s when we meet them. And I think that feeling probably never goes away, but it might be especially potent when you are getting to a point where like, are you going to get to this next level in your career? Can you do it?
Yeah, it was interesting seeing the different characters that helped push them, her father, which then her mother, stuff like that. It was really interesting because it is such a psychological, like, what can push you to do the next step, to actually take it and do it, so
Yeah,
it's
absolutely
a really good book.
I like how you talk about, work friendships, and this explores this, workplace friendship. Because, a lot of people tend to categorize their friendships, right? Like they have their friends, or they have their work friends, or their church friends, or their author friends, or whatever it is. And they're complicated relationships. And I love how you talked about how maybe sometimes they didn't talk, or sometimes they didn't get along, and then they're back together. So was that really intentional with you, that you were focusing on this friendship and trying to make it really authentic? Because it read very authentic to me.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I wanted, was for them to really feel like real people who would have a difficult but really meaningful connection that was going to end up mattering a great deal to both of them, and maybe in different ways, and in different ways at different times in their lives, because it doesn't cover their whole lives, but I think the book covers, maybe a decade or something like that.
Long time. Yeah. That's great. So as you know, on the Virgin Authors, I mean, we focus on building community with other authors who are not yet traditionally published, or who are not in the stage of the career that they want to be in. There's lots of, ways people get published nowadays. And so it really reaches everybody. So this is not your first published book. You have multiple. Would you be willing to share just some inside tips about, some hope or some suggestions for those people who are still in the query process, in the contest cycles that we go through, of things maybe you've learned after 3 or 4 books now, of helpful ideas?
Well, and we know that you're with a different publisher, because Zibby is a brand new publishing house. So, so maybe how you got to Zibby from wherever you were published prior.
Yeah, I mean, there's endless amounts of things that I could say, because publishing is such a crazy business, and it just gets weirder and more unpredictable every year that I am in it. But I think, the big thing that has mattered to me was just to have some faith that it was worth putting my work out there. Something that I remember a lot when I was working as an editor for a literary journal is that at one point my boss had decided to take a look at like who was submitting to us, and because Submittable made this really easy. We could see who submitted and how many times they submitted, and he started telling people, what I noticed is that first time submissions, it's pretty equal gender breakdown. Men and women are submitting maybe equally, but the men kept submitting after being rejected, and the women disproportionately would get rejected once and not come back. And
not us, right, girls?
Yeah, right.
That's surprising.
It was very helpful to me, though, to realize that. To realize that when I was working as an editor, I generally was not passing on things because I just despised them. I was angry that they had even come my way. I was passing on them because I had, a very limited number of slots that I could fill, because it just wasn't quite right, because it was perfectly competent or perfectly good, but there was not a spark. And I kind of needed to have a spark of like really falling in love and advocating for this piece. And I needed to know that, because I think writers tend to go out there just feeling, we immediately beat ourselves up when we get inevitably rejected, because that is how the numbers work. Like the rejection is coming. And so it just made me realize you can't internalize it like that. It can mean that you have more work to do on your craft. Like that is absolutely a thing that we will never get over. You'll be doing that as long as you're writing. But you do have to trust that it's worth doing, and that it's worth continuing to put your work out there, and learn from that submission. Keep sending back to the same place. If you got a little bit of interest and they say, try us again, it's not a lie. Like, go ahead and try them again, because that is often how you're going to get to your path to publication.
All right. I like that.
That's good advice. We have a joint friend who also kind of gave that same advice. I had told him, I had read a response back from a publisher and read him just a couple sentences. And he's like, that's not a generic email. If they sent you something kind or told you to resubmit, or, you know, if it's a personal thing that you can tell they've read your work, it's real. Like, you know, be responsive and submit again and try again. And so that's wonderful advice.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. There are these tiers to the rejections, you know, because that's the joy of publishing, right? They're like, it's a good rejection.
Yeah.
But it
They're
is.
also
It really
nice.
is. Yeah.
Good
Oh my
rejection.
gosh.
You know, I think about the studies they've done of even little, we as women, we've been doing this since we were like 6 years old, you know, and the kindergartners, when the teacher asks you to raise your hand, it's even boys and girls raising their hands. And the older they get, the fewer girls raise their hands. And
That's true.
it's like beaten into us, and we have to break
Yeah.
free of that.
Yeah, it comes up in the book a little bit too, I think, because I've seen that dynamic where you're in a room with a bunch of people and some people are just really talking loudly and they've just got like, oh, it's this and it's that. And you're like, if I don't feel like just yelling about this or really just, you know, going after something, does that mean that I just don't have strong enough opinions, or I just, you know, I must not know enough if I'm not recognizing it? And so I talked to my daughter about this, where I'm like, they don't know more than you do. They're just talking more loudly. You know, that's really kind of all it is. And so you just have to recognize that for what it is. And I think these characters also have to kind of come to see that, you know, other people are just, they're just talking more loudly or pretending to have confidence that they may or may not actually have.
That's true.
Oh,
Yeah.
really interesting to me.
Okay.
I've never heard the mail thing before. That's very in the book industry for the submissions. Very interesting.
Yeah.
At least for our one literary journal, you know, my sample size was limited, but it was around for a long time. So I'm going to count it.
Okay. All right. We are going to move on to a lightning round. We're not going to be talking about your book specifically, but we want our readers to, or our listeners to get to know you better as an author and pick up your books. And so we're just going to ask you a series of questions and respond, you know, as quickly as we can, and then we'll each just rotate. And so I'll go through how many questions or queries or submissions did you have to do for this book?
I do not know. I think probably maybe 10, 12, something like that. I'm not sure.
Okay. All
My
right.
agent-
Yeah. And this
Okay.
is not, because this is not her first. Yes.
Yeah, I know. You're my hero. I read that you like to work out prior to writing. And what type of workout do you like to do besides, you know, lifting the arm?
Yeah, I either do, right. Yeah, I start with gin every day. You know, I either do like a base camp, like, you know, high intensity interval thing, or I do yoga. But my favorite thing to do is to be on the treadmill watching bad TV, because as long as you are on the treadmill, it doesn't matter how bad the TV is, you still have a net gain.
Yeah.
Yes. Agreed.
Not wasting your time. Do you have pets with you while you're working?
No, I do not. We currently are a pet-free house, and that was a bit of a sad development, because my daughter begged and begged for pet rats, and after saying over my dead body, I finally gave in and I let them get pet rats, and then I kind of fell in love with these little rats, but then they died, and so now we have nothing.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Who's coming with you on book tour?
I'm going to bring my best friend with me to Chicago, and probably a couple of other people as well. And then I'll meet other friends. Like, I don't know that I'll bring them with me on book tour, but I'll be meeting them in various cities. And then I usually make my husband and daughter just stay home and continue their lives.
Nice.
Okay, so what actor or actresses would you want in the movie for this
Ooh,
book?
That's always a fun parlor game. Okay. I picture Thessaly as looking like Sofia Coppola, who doesn't act.
Really?
But that is kind of what she looks like to me.
Okay.
I don't know about Ren. I would have to look around, but you know, I'm just going to say this because it's really fun to picture. Let's all just imagine that Florence Pugh will do that, because that's just fun to picture.
Oh, fun.
Yeah. Okay.
Interesting. I was going totally kind of different.
Where were you going?
I was nothing personal, Mandy, because you're blonde, but I was thinking somebody blonde and powerful, like you know, and I can never pronounce her name. Charlize Theron. And I know she's older than what your character is, but just strong, very sure, very beautiful. You know, bam for Thessaly. Yeah, Ren is a tough one because she's really surprising. You know, she knows her stuff and she's strong. So yeah, that's a tough.
Well, I will say, if Charlize Theron decides that she wants to star as Thessaly, I will grudgingly.
I just thought of
You would concede.
She's so strong, but yet she's very vulnerable. I know. Anyway, go ahead.
Okay, so did you draw on any real life events for things that happen in this book? Or have you ever?
I'm
put
sure
over-
I always do. Like there's bits and pieces, but sometimes they are stories that people tell me. Sometimes they're experiences that I had that I, morph into something different for this. For the research that I did, some of these wineries were places that I went. And so I remember like actually seeing the mobile bottling truck that is described.
Oh, that was
actually
so
is the thing that
interesting.
comes up the mountain.
That was fun.
Yeah. And so absolutely, I can't remember all of them, but and also I lived in New York for during the early aughts from like 2000 to 2007. So a lot of those restaurants are my favorite restaurants, or like when they go to a noodle joint, that's like my favorite noodle joint, things like that.
That's
Nice.
fun. Who is your favorite author right now?
Always a tough call. I always return to Alice Munro, like over and over again. She's what I read when I want to be reminded that I want to write. Laurie Colwin, I go back to an awful lot. And most recently this summer, I really loved Elisa Albert's Human Blues, because I just think that she is kind of a firebrand and I'm always interested in what she has to say.
Oh, cool.
Because in my
Thanks.
stocking, I was reading that you like to read a little before you write, which is interesting. And so that's part of one of the questions, like, what is your process for writing? But
Yeah,
so
because you have
read
to
a
like
little prior to writing. I
right.
don't.
Otherwise, I can't get everything else out of my head. There's always other stuff that you should be doing, and you're trying to transition from like, your workout and then your breakfast and then your shower, and you're like, okay, I have to. Basically, what you have to do is meditate a little bit, I think. And my version of that is to just stop, and just read a few pages. And because right before I do that, I feel like I've got nothing to say. I can't write. What's writing? And then when I look at the right kind of thing, it starts to get your brain going. And so it's a really functional kind of reading where I don't get drawn in because it's something I've read 1,000 times before, but it gets me thinking.
Interesting.
Okay, how old were you when you wrote your first story?
Let's see. I think my very first story, I was in 6th grade. It was about a unicorn that looked beautiful, but was in fact evil.
Ooh,
nice.
how 8 did you say?
I think it was in, no, wait, it was like in 5th grade. I had some pretty bad novellas that I wrote in elementary school. They're still around.
Wow. Okay. What is your favorite drink or snack while writing?
I drink huge amounts of water. And that's kind of it. It's water or tea. And I don't usually have a snack because what I tend to do is I'll be like, if I can just finish writing, I get to go make lunch.
Oh, nice. You're on a schedule.
Yeah. Right. It's the carrot that draws me through.
Yeah.
Okay. You literally just get up, you work out. I'm just going to keep following up on the past question. So you get up, you work out, you read a little of somebody else's work, and then you write like 9 to 5 type of thing, or how do you?
No, even if I could write 9 to 5, like, financially, if I didn't need to earn any other money, I don't think I could do it. I think I need to have other things going on in limited amounts. So like my best writing schedule is going to be like several mornings a week. It might be like 4-hour blocks. And those are, you guys all know, if you're all writers, if you're writing for like 4 straight hours and you're creating new work, you're tired. And so you have to go do something else. So when I'm in a writing mode, that's kind of what it will look like. I'll still have to do, the other boring stuff, like administrative stuff, but then I'll do my writing and editing in separate kind of blocks.
Interesting.
Okay, so this is your 4th novel, and I don't know how many of them may have come out during COVID, so how many book tours you've been on, but do you find them thrilling, terrifying, a little both?
Both, because I actually really have a lot of fun doing events and giving readings and talking to people like that. I enjoy, but the terror of, showing up and will anybody else show up with you, that never goes away. And so that's the part where you're just like, oh, this time. So it can be wonderful, but it can also just be a little bit like, oh, that's right. It's a very big and busy world out there and it can be hard to draw people in. But once you do, it's really fun. Like that part I really enjoy.
I have to say that's the one cool thing about Zibby Books. I follow all of you guys after we interview you, and I mean she's new, the whole thing, but she's dynamo. The way they have wine parties, or they have fun book signings, or the events for you guys.
Yeah.
And you do things together, right, with other writers?
Yeah, we have. So we did it at one point. We did a retreat with just the writers. It wasn't like a public thing. It was just the writers and the publicity people and publishers and editors, just to get to know one another as they were kind of getting it all off the ground. And then we do these retreats where it'll be like several writers together, and then whoever wants to come and like be in this place and have a big writing and book focused kind of weekend. So we are doing one in Solvang in California. in September. And that'll be me and Patty Lynn, who's another Zibby author, and a couple other people. And that I'm really excited for. There's going to be one in, I believe, Rhode Island, with another Zibby author, Jane DeLury, and a couple other writers. That'll be in the end of August.
We love Jane.
That's
So, oh yeah, Jane's amazing.
fun when you have other people. I mean, we're all, and they're all such different, scopes and different books. So it's not really a competition. It's such a weird thing, but it's such a support, I think, having that. I've done that a few times. So.
Yeah. And there's something too about like, the one author a month kind of thing. And because you're all with a new startup, it's like a win for one is a win for all, because you just want everybody to do well, because it's, rising tide lifts all boats and that kind of stuff. But it's retreats are going to be really fun. I'm looking forward to those a lot.
That's exciting. Okay, so you kind of touched on it when we asked you about who your favorite author was right now, but currently who inspires you to keep going every day and creating these worlds, and what keeps you going?
That's a good question. I think what keeps me going is just that even though there's different kinds of work that I like to do, like I like teaching and I like editing, and then I like, just things that are completely different. But I don't feel fully like myself if I don't have that grounding of, you are still a writer, and that is what generates all the other stuff.
Nice.
So I think it's, so I guess what I'm saying is myself inspires me.
Yourself. That's what I'm
I
hearing.
love that.
The vision of myself that I want to keep.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
I start getting really grumpy. I'm like, I haven't written for a week, all of a sudden I'll click. And so I love that, because it's like, it's such a good, no, I love that. Yourself as your supporter. That's not easy either, girl.
Yeah.
No, it's not, because without it, there's a lot of like wandering into walls and being like, what do I do? Huh? So yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we are almost out of time, and we've been picking your brain. We love talking to you, though. You're just, I have to just say quick, your hair. I love your hair.
Oh, thank you.
I know that sounds silly, but
this is humidity. This is what happens. Yeah.
no, but you can handle it. You look gorgeous. Oh my God.
Beautiful.
It looks like we're out of time. So we want to thank you so much for being here. And we're so happy to support your book. We can't tell you guys enough. Grab a glass of wine, get this book.
I'll just hold this up, do with
Yes,
the
please.
I'll hold up my glass.
Yeah.
It's in August 1st, right? Is that what
August 1st. So it's a week from tomorrow is when it's officially out.
Wow.
Oh my God.
Tell our listeners where you'll be on tour, and I'm sure they can buy your book at
absolutely. You can buy it, wherever you buy books. I will be on tour, or definitely around Madison, which is where I live. I will be in Chicago in August. I'll be in Rhode Island. I will be around LA and Solvang in September. I'll be in South Carolina in October, and maybe a couple of other places as well, but you can find me online, and I'll be putting all of that up there. And like,
your website already has your website already has it's a nice little schedule there. It's pretty ready.
Yeah, so. I'm trying to add in a couple more things, because I was like, the hometown reading, I want to go back to Ohio and see friends, so hopefully I can
Colorado.
Maybe.
Well, you can join the Virgin Authors here on Facebook Live on the third Thursday of every month, and you can get more information on our website, virginauthors.com. Please also watch for more of our Zibby Book collaboration authors like Michelle, and thanks for tuning in, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks.
Great book, you guys. Read it.